Now let me show you how to sumo deadlift. The setup in the sumo deadlift is more important for the full sumo deadlift than the setup in the conventional. If you set up any sort of incorrectness in your sumo deadlift setup, the whole lift is going to fall apart. You have to consider your toe angle, your hip height, your lats, your core, your head, your grip. Now, if you noticed, when I was pulling conventional, I pulled mixed grip. And when I pulled sumo, I pulled hook grip. It is even more difficult for larger lifters to have the mixed grip when it comes to sumo, because you end up gripping further inside than if you were in conventional. This means that I have to basically bring my grip in, and I'm at a weird angle and it doesn't feel any sort of good. So I elect to do the hook grip so that my shoulders and back are straight away. Now, this doesn't mean you can't pull mixed grip. You can elect to not learn hook grip because it is a pain in the ass to learn. But pulling sumo, you have a lot more things to consider. It is more dependent on technicality than it is on strength. That's why you'll see lighter lifters who are mobile, flexible, and lighter lifting heavier deadlifts than the super heavies who are pulling conventional. And as it stands now, all the top deadlifters right now outside of Dan Bell are all sumo deadlifters. They're able to wedge their hips, leverage the lift up. And once you have that down, then you start developing the muscle groups that are required for increasing that deadlift far beyond 900 pounds. So how you set your feet and where you set your feet is very important when it comes to sumo. What you want to do is, if you look at your feet, you have a diagonal at this part of your foot, and you want to set that diagonal parallel to the plates. So your feet should be angled like this. So you set your feet and you've got this parallel with this, and you set the other foot the same way. The width that you want to set your feet is dependent on your body structure. But luckily we have these rings that'll help us make sure that that setup is consistent. So you set your toes up parallel with the plates, and you want to make sure that you almost have a 45-degree angle here. And when you set up, you want your feet to basically be straight up and down. This is going to minimize the range of motion that you're going to need without sacrificing too many muscle groups going to be involved. Then you're not isolating your glutes, hamstrings, and quads from the movement. So you've got your feet set. Next, you want to grab the bar. This is another situation in sumo specifically where the difference between mixed grip and hook grip comes into play. Because if you pull sumo, if you hold on the smooth part of the bar or the knurled part of the bar, it doesn't really matter because the grip isn't dependent on the bar. It's not dependent on your grip strength. Nothing really matters except for the integrity of a system inside of your hand. So if you're pulling mixed grip, you want to be as close in as possible without going and compromising your grip on the smooth part. But if you're pulling hook grip, you're able to put 1 to 2 fingers, maybe 3 fingers inside. This is going to be wholly personally dependent on what you are capable of doing, what your body dictates you can do. So I set my grip. Once I have the grip set, I want to take my air. And it's the same bracing as with conventional. You want to fill your stomach with air and then get ready to be punched and tighten that core up. While doing so, you want to pinch your scaps and bring them down, just like in conventional. This is going to end up incorporating your hips. You don't want to bring your hips just forward or just down. You want to get your hips as close to the bar as possible while maintaining a deep level for your hips to go. You basically want to squat down with your hips, but bring your hips to the bar. As the legendary powerlifter Ed Cohn says, teabag the bar. You basically want to bring your scrotum as close as you can to the bar while in this position, staying tight. And then once you are as tight as you can, then you just lift the bar. The act of getting your hips down and close to the bar is what's called wedging. And this is kind of like the act of wedging is the abuse of your leverages available to you in the deadlift. The harder you can wedge into something, it's almost like you're trying to roll a wheel up a flight of stairs. You get to a point where you only get one point of contact with the wheel and the stair, and it kind of wedges itself on top, and it raises just by rolling. So you're basically rolling the bar up by using yourself as a wedge. But in the act of wedging, if anything gets loose, you lose the rigidity, you lose the stiffness of your wedge. It's almost like the stone stair that you're trying to roll a wheel up goes soft, kind of like going from cement to a balloon, where it can still be tight and you can kind of still get it up, but it's compromising and the balloon can pop. So here's what a sumo deadlift ends up looking like. The side view of a sumo deadlift is important to look at occasionally, because when you set up and you're wedging yourself in, you want to make sure that your ankles, knees, and shoulders are in line. You want joints stacked up on each other, and that's going to provide you the leverage in order to lift the bar. Top sumo deadlifters are very mobile. They've got good hip mobility, good knee mobility, good ankle mobility. And these are all things that you have to add to your training in order to make sure that you have a good sumo deadlift, if you elect to use the sumo deadlift. If your hips start too high, then you end up locking your knees out first, and then it ends up becoming a stiff-legged sumo deadlift, and it becomes highly dependent on your erectors. And the proper way to perform a sumo deadlift is kind of isolating the erectors and making sure they've got minimal role to play in the sumo deadlift. If you're finding that your knees are locking before your hips and you've got a lot of stress on your lower back, that it's usually because your hips are too high in your starting position. But additionally, you can have your hips too low in your starting position, and this ends up bringing your shoulders out of whack. Things go wrong when you have your hips too low. So you got to find that happy zone where you have a minimal range of motion, the minimal effect on your lower back, and a speedy lockout. It is a common saying that if a sumo deadlift breaks the floor, it's going to get locked out, because the hardest part of a sumo deadlift is getting that leverage, getting that starting position. And if you don't get a correct starting position for the sumo deadlift, it ends up not even breaking the floor. But if it does break the floor, chances are you got a good leverage, good starting position, and it's going to be a little easier to lock out. If you're having trouble locking out, usually that means that your starting position is too high. Your hips are too high. It's all about finding that leverage point, that leverage height of your hips, where you still have the stacked joints and you're able to get the bar up off the floor without, I don't want to say without much effort, because 900 pounds is 900 pounds, but a 19-year-old can deadlift 900 pounds these days, because they're finding good leverage points, they're finding good wedges, they're able to manipulate their body in a way that reduces the range of motion as much as possible, and they're able to get tight and basically roll that wheel up the flight of stairs.